Okay, so let's get started on our code. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create properties for all those things that we just talked about. So we had the X position, and that's just going to be an int. Whoops, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Private var X position, int. Okay, private var Y position, it's just an int, and a lot of these are going to be ints, so I'm just going to start copying this. So we have X position, we have a Y position, then I said, okay, well, we're going to move the X over, and so that is going to be the column width, and we're going to have one for the row height. We move the rows down each row, and we need one for the max width, right? That's that maximum width of the whole thing. And we're going to have a variable for our item count to tell us which item that we're on. So we're setting up our properties here ahead of time so we know what we're working with. And then in our constructor function here, the first thing we should do is set default values for properties. You could also call it initial values. Alright, so X position we'll just set to 0. Y position we'll set to 0 as well. And then column width. So this depends on exactly how much space I have in each item. You could do this dynamically based on the width of the item. I'm just going to use for now a hard-coded number. I'm going to use 85, and that is the square width, which is 75 plus 10. So I have 10 pixels here. And row height is also going to be equal to 85, which is equal to my square height, which is 75 plus 10. Okay, so we got our column width, our row height. Now we set our max width. Okay, and it's up to you and what you want to do. Right now, I'm just going to set it to 325. And you can do some math to figure that out in terms of what you want. Just however many columns you want, so you can set that, and also how much space you might want in there. So, for example, my column width is 85. If I multiply that by 4 or 5 or 6, I can get a number out there. And you may not want some padding to the side of that too, so you might add another 10 pixels or something like that. All right, so we have a max width, and our item count, we're going to start at 0. Okay, so now let's go on to it, and I'm actually going to do this by running a function, and that way later on, if we want to do it a little differently, we can run a different function. So I'm going to say layout items I'll say layout in grid. Okay, that's going to be my function for now. So let's copy that, and we're going to make our grid layout functions. So private function, layout in grid, void. So I'm just going to do a little trace statement here just to make sure everything's working. Layout in grid. And let's run our thing and see if it works. Okay, so we run it, and we get layout in grid. So far so good. No errors. It's good at this point to at least do that to make sure you didn't do any typos with your properties and things like that. Okay, so let's go to the next piece. So what we want to do is we want to create a new square. So I'm going to do it by a variable in this function here. And let's just do one, and then we'll look at doing a whole bunch of them. So var square, and then in the name of that custom, the name of the linkage that I set up. So let's do square. We're going to call it square clip. I think there's already a square data type. That's why I used a square clip. And then we're going to say add child square. All right, so let's just make sure that that works. Okay, good. So we got our layout and grid, and we get our square right there. So good so far. By the way, if it's not showing up in the top left there, one of the things to look for in it is where your registration point is, right? And so this one is in the top left corner. That's going to make it lay out like that. If my registration point was in the middle of this movie clip, I would only be seeing the bottom right of the movie clip. All right, so we're adding the child square. And now what we want to do is we really want to add a bunch of them. So let's just do that here. For loop to add squares. Okay, so I'm going to do a typical for loop here. Var I int equals 0. I is less than, I'm just going to put out a number here. We can change this later, and I plus plus. So that's how many squares I want to put out. All right, this there. And actually we're going to move that end curly brace down here so that we add 12 children out. So let's do that. There we go. And see what happens. So we do it, but it looks pretty much the same because they're all laid out on top of each other. So let's go on now and excuse me, do a little bit more here. So let's worry about this X position, Y position stuff. And if we go back out here, let's get back to that diagram real quick. We want to now add this column width to each one, right? So we want to add column width each time through. So let's start with just doing that. So after I do it, I'm going to say square dot X equals, and we're going to use our X position and then column width. X position, all right, and let's start. Actually, let's start square dot Y equals Y position. Now that's not going to actually change anything in and of itself. So let's just run that real quick. All right, it's still there. So what we need to do now is change the X position after each time. So after I add it, I'm going to move the X position. So X position plus equals, I'm saying adding onto it, and I'm going to add onto it that column width property here, right? So I'm adding that after each time. And let's run that and see how that looks. So there we go. So now what's happened though is they've kind of gone way off the edge here, right? So now what we need to do is we need to add that check to say, is it reached the end? So that's going to be, if you want, if is a good thing, as I'm talking about it here. I want to say, well, in a certain case, when it's reached the max width here, right? So that's our max width property. When we reach that, I want to set it back to 0 and then move it over. So let's do that. So we'll put in our if statement. So check to see if reached max width. So if my X position is greater than max width, then move back to beginning. X position equals 0. All right. Now, of course, if we don't do anything to the Y position, it's just going to put them all in over each other again in the same place. So we're going to say move down to next row. So our Y position, we're going to add that plus equals, and then we had a variable called row height, which does our Y, right? So that's our, got put down under here, but oh, there it is. Row height there, right? So we're going to move down our row height. So we get to the end, we say, oh, the X is greater than the max width, so set it back to 0, and then move down our row height. Okay, so that's our if statement there. Let's check that out. So there we go. Now we have 12. They're laid out in a nice little grid there. So that's good. Let's add one more piece here, which is we want to add in the count for each one. So after each time, as we're going through, we can add to the item count. So it depends where you want to start at 0 or 1, whether you want to change this property before or after you add to the item count. So I want to start at 1 just to make it look more normal. The other reminder here, though, before I do, is in my square clip, this text field here is called num_txt, and it's inside the movie clip. So I'm going to have to refer to the movie clip and then to num_txt. So, so we add our square, and actually I can just do it right here. Okay, show the item number. All right, and remember we're keeping track of it in item count. So square dot num_txt dot text equals, and then we have to make it a string. Actually, let me show you the error that you'll get here. Item count. All right, and if we want to do that, we would first, depending on where you put this, it's going to start at 0, 1. So if I do this, item count plus plus, then item count starts at 0, it would go to 1, so the first box would start with 1 and go on. If I put this after the text, the first box would start at 0 and move on from there. Okay, so let's show you the error, though, that we get here. You're going to get this error: implicit coercion of value type int to unrelated type string. Okay, so let's see what that error comes from. So this item count we made as an int, when we defined it up here. Okay, and however, the text property of a text field is a string. So remember, what you can do now is we can convert it, this integer, to a string with the string function, like that. And let's run this again. So there we go. So now we got our count through 12. All right, so that's the basic way to lay things out in a grid. I'm going to stop here. The next one is going to be how to add some interactivity to this so that we can click on each of these items and get some information out of them.